Hello, friends. Welcome back to No Cap Room here on the Ball Don't Lie podcast network. My name is Jake Fischer. I'm a senior NBA reporter at Yahoo Sports. Joining me as always is my man, your man, everyone's man, Dan Devine. What's up?
Jake Fischer. We are barreling toward the knockout rounds of the in-season tournament. We've got all sorts of NBA action to discuss, and I can't think of anybody that I'd rather do it with than you here today.
Is that why you haven't asked me to be a guest on Divine Intervention yet? Because you just want to talk about sports.
I said I can't think of anyone else I'd rather talk to today. Tuesdays, that's a whole other thing. Also, yeah, I think you could run it up the flagpole with producer John Gennaro, and he can tell you whether or not you're allowed to be a guest on the show. I really only do but so much of the booking.
I just see you sneaking in an opportunity to practice and prove your pronunciation of John Gennaro's last name.
That's exactly right. He told me that he wasn't allowed to yell at me about it, so I'm going to yell at myself because that's how Dan Devine do.
There you go. All right. Well, Dan Devine does that. We will do this show and not waste any more time. Today, we're going to be talking about the things we want to talk about. There's no gimmicks. There's no games. There's no Thanksgiving table with stuffing. Today, we're just going to talk about what we want to. And some of the stuff that I want to talk about is definitely newsy. The first, the Orlando Magic, my Orlando Magic.
Yours, exactly right.
8 games in a row now. I remember when they were in town 2 Tuesdays ago. So I'm going to do quick mental math. Today is the 30th. On Thursday, that means this Tuesday was the 28th. That means last Tuesday was the 21st. Tuesday, November 21st, the Magic were in town. I spoke with Franz Wagner and Mo Wagner, wrote a nice little dual profile on the brothers. And as I left, as I thanked Magic PR czar Joel Glass for the access, I said to them, if you guys have a couple more wins here, maybe we'll run this next week. They had a couple more, and then more, and then more. And now they are 1 game shy of first place, where they first kind of moved to 4th place, and a buddy with the team sent me that 4th place semi-pro gif. And now 4th place is like not enough. It's not worthy of acknowledging just how high these Orlando Magic have climbed. So Dan, all the hocus pocus out there in today's NBA, do you believe in magic, in these Magic?
In these Magic specifically? I mean, believe in magic generally. I believe in Practical Magic. It's a great film with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. I want to stipulate before I say any more things. This is incredible. This is so richly deserved for Magic fans who have watched this franchise stumble blindfolded through a field of rakes for a decade. It's so cool to watch. I mean, the way that they just absolutely put the hammer down again last night to get to 8 wins and 8 straight. The Jalen Suggs to Cole Anthony evoking the Wade to LeBron alley-oop. They are feeling themselves, and they should be, and this franchise and the fan base should be. That said, I'm not sure I totally believe in the offense. Is that fair to say?
You're not buying the magician and all the I don't know, the glitz and the glamour. You're trying to figure out what really makes the trick work.
Yeah, it's like they've reached into the top hat and pulled out a league average offense, and I'm not sure if it's actually there or not. Here's some numbers, because I know you love those. You just did mental math on the show live. Entering Thursday, the Magic are 13th in offensive efficiency according to NBA Advanced Stats, 15th according to Cleaning the Glass, which strips out garbage time numbers, 23rd according to adjusted offensive rating on dunks and threes. So that factors in your strength of schedule, and they faced the second softest slate of opposing defenses in the entire league. Ooh. 10 of their 18 games have come against these defenses. The Trailblazers, who stink. The Jazz, who stink. The Mavericks, who don't stink so bad but aren't that good. The Hawks, who kind of stink. The Bucks, who surprisingly have stunk on defense this season. The Bulls twice, who super stink. The Pacers, who turn every offense they play into the Pacers. The Wizards, who they get again tomorrow night, and they really stink. And the Hornets, who stink. So it's chicken and the egg a little bit. Are all those teams really bad on defense because they played the Magic? Or are the Magic really good or better on offense because they've played those defenses? I'm not so sure. But so, Jake, that's my concern with it. I'm like, have we seen them be an average offense because of the context around it? Or do you think there's stuff there that makes them a real offense?
I think there's stuff there. I think partially, this adage goes across all sports. yeah, to be a good team, you have to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat and that are in front of you.
Right.
And they're doing that, right? This is not a team that, in the beginning of the season, there were a couple fourth quarters that they just didn't really have the closing punch that veteran teams do. And they seem to be putting away the teams that they need to. That win against Boston, I was talking to an agent buddy last night who was in the stands for that game a couple weeks back now, or a week and a half or so, whatever it was. And the calls were just going in Boston's way. Jason Tatum to the line, Jason Tatum to the line, Jason Tatum to the line. And Orlando still pulls it out. I think, with the supersized ball handlers that they have and Paolo and Franz Wagner, I see, to look at this in this Boston lens, I see the makings of a Tatum and Jaylen Brown type of offense that they have. And all this is coming without Markelle Fultz and without Wendell Carter, two guys who were supposed to be starters. So maybe it's addition by subtraction in a certain extent with those guys. Maybe, this is maybe Fultz's absence has helped allow Jalen Suggs to kind of turn into Marcus Smart 2.0. But
he's been absolutely sensational for them. He is just a shot of adrenaline every single time he gets into the game.
Yeah, I've loved Jalen Suggs this season, and I liked him back at Gonzaga for the football playerness that I saw in him. He looked like the starting quarterback on the varsity team after a state championship that just dropped into the high school basketball team and was still good, even though you didn't really know exactly what he was doing out there. And he is playing defense like a football player to the point where, he is well on his way to an all defensive consideration right now. So I don't know. They're one of the most formidable defensive teams in the league. That is going to win. That is going to travel. That is going to help you win games throughout an 82-game muck. And they, along with the Pacers, are just two young teams right now in the Eastern Conference that had a goal of being more competitive. They're doing it. I don't see them taking their foot off the gas. These random games in late November, the in-season tournament, that they came this close to advancing as first the Group C winner, and then they were in the thick of the wild card stuff. I feel like the Magic might have a little bit more to play for in this early stretch of the season compared to just another veteran playoff team that's just trying to get to April.
Yeah, and let me put the bottom piece of bread on the compliment sandwich here, right? Where I say something nice and then something critical, and now here's the nice part again. We have seen recipes like this offensively work. Even if you're skeptical of the guard play, you mentioned Fultz being out. That might be one reason why they're bottom 5 in turnover rate. He's the more steady set of hands they've got there. But the formula that they have is they absolutely hammer the rim. They go in, they're in the paint constantly. I think they're more than 40% of their shots are coming right at the basket. That's the most in the league. They're number 6 in offensive rebounding rate. They're number 3 in free throw attempt rate. So they're just pounding the paint. And that, that's still the most valuable real estate in the game. And if that's what they're going to control offensively, it gives you an opportunity to be a good offense, even if you're not really generating much from beyond the arc. But that's kind of the thing to be wary of there. 28th in 3-point makes and attempts per game, 19th in 3-point accuracy, only 18th in assist rate. There are pathways for more of that, right? Maybe Fultz comes back and boosts the assist rate. Maybe there's growth from guys like Anthony Black, who's been an important connector for them. Jet Howard, Caleb Houston, guys that can shoot the three, that maybe they get into the rotation a little bit more. Jalen Suggs has actually been, I think, is up over 37% from three now. So that was a huge swing skill for him. And it seems to be swinging in the right direction now, which is great. But the question of me is just do they have enough juice, playmaking and scoring and shot making juice in the backcourt outside of Cole Anthony, who is kind of feels like he's found his perfect role as that 6th man off the bench for them, running that second unit. So it's possible that their formula that's gotten them to where they are now works well enough in combination with that defense, in combination with that second unit, for the offense to not be an issue. It's something that I would want to monitor. If you're a league, bottom of the league caliber offense with your best players on the floor, which is what they are, they're in Paolo and Franz's minutes together, they're a 107 offensive rating, which is Pistons level, which is not where you want to be, as we'll get to in a second. So I feel like that's got to matter at some point. But right now, it sure as hell isn't, because that defense, that bench, and all that energy and youth is carrying them. It's been fantastic to watch. So I believe, with some reservations, I don't know, I'm not an atheist on it. I'm just maybe agnostic on it.
Well, there's going to be plenty of veteran shooters available on the trade deadline to try to maybe add a little extra juice to that offense. There's going to be plenty of guards, I think, that will be available or at least open for discussion. Plenty of just wings in Atlanta. And that's a segue to talk about a player that I've wanted to talk about on the podcast for a while, but I was selfishly holding it because I wanted to write about him. But now Jalen Johnson out for 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured wrist, which is devastating news for the fanboys of Jalen Johnson out there, such as myself. I've been like deliriously texting Atlanta people during my league pass watching of the Hawks, trying to just showcase how much I've been a fan to try to boost my accessibility at speaking with the young man at Duke. And I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken. He was like one of my favorite players in the league to watch this season, to the point where he was giving like Ben Simmons bigger, stronger Philadelphia version before all the chaos against Atlanta, funnily enough. It's a huge loss. He was extension eligible after the season, so 4 to 6 weeks, like this is kind of going to loom over all of December and January in theory, when teams are going to be starting to address log jams in certain positions and trying to figure out accounting ahead of who you have to pay and whatnot. And it's a real monkey wrench in a Hawks season that has already kind of been stated as like an evaluation period. Quinn Snyder's first full year with the reins, Onyeka Okongwu locked up an extension that, talking to certain people around the league, like people thought maybe it was an overpay, other people thought it was like an underpay, other people thought it was just right. So seems like there's, like, to me, that read makes it like a manageable contract just from a standpoint of like team building and functionality and flexibility to trade out of it if you wanted to. But there's a kind of a jam at center there in the front court where Jalen has played up, and you got Big O, and Clint Capella has been a Trae Young darling. And then on the wing, you have all this overlapping with Bogdanovich and DeAndre Hunter. And obviously they have 2 point guards that are all-star caliber players. So I don't know, just subtracting arguably their third best player, maybe even arguably their second or first best player on several nights in Jalen Johnson, it's going to provide just a different evaluation period for what's going on down there in Atlanta. What say you about Jalen Johnson, Dan?
Yeah, it makes it harder just for a situation that's already been kind of tricky. They're 8-9. The fundamentals are similar to what we've seen from them before, like really good offense, really bad defense. A lot of guys that look like they should fit together better than maybe they do. We've talked before, you and I, about the Quinn Snyder making sense of all of the pieces that he has. And Jalen Johnson had proven to be a really important piece in that discussion, especially on the defensive end, right? Like, we know the Hawks are going to be able to score with just about anybody. It's, can they get any stops at all ever to become a serious team again? And with Jalen Johnson on the court, they were about a league average defense. With him off of it, they're giving up 7.3 more points per 100 possessions. That's, again, bottom of the league level. And so he is not, now I'm not saying that makes him defensive player of the year, all defense caliber, right? But like the size, the athleticism, the versatility, the fact that you're not as reliant on some players who maybe are a little bit weaker as wing defenders, that the cascading effects of that all matter. And it all, I mean, to the extent, maybe like the glass half full case on this is, of all of those guys that they've got to evaluate and they've got to try to figure out, now they get pressed into larger roles and sort of, it's time to sink or swim, and for everybody to figure it out together. Like, you now need more consistency from Saddiq Bey. You need more consistency in production from DeAndre Hunter, who a couple of years ago was actually in this same kind of space. He looked like he was their second best player, and then he got hurt, and it's been this kind of winding road for him to get back to, profitability within that system. AJ Griffin was completely out of the rotation, and now he's back in and going to get a chance. He's going to get a look because they need bodies on the wing there. And he went 0 for 8 in 15 minutes in his first crack at it, which is not ideal. But, these guys are all going to have to sort of carve out the space for them to where they show that they're part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem with a team that looks like it should be better than mid and hasn't really been for most of the last couple of seasons. The good news is if you're going to have one of these sorts of injuries, better to have it early than late. But the bad news is it starts to get late early when you're gone for a month and a half around the holidays. And like by the time Jalen Johnson gets back in the fold, if they're not significantly better than where they've been now, then you're talking about play-in fight as opposed to top 6. And, that's a tough place to be.
And I wondered, as I was saying at the top, like I wonder if that shifts Atlanta into seller mode at all, which we will talk about some more sellers coming up here in a few minutes. But first, just wanted to give another quick update on the in-season tournament. We know Vinny Goodwill did a great breakdown on all the quarterfinal matchups on his podcast, The Good Word with Goodwill, yesterday. But just wanted to give you guys some new gambling odds courtesy of our friends at BetMGM, being that the elimination games are here. The knockout round is here. You either win and go to Vegas or you lose and watch from home. And then you will play, as I found out after speaking with Evan Wash from the NBA scheduling room on, I guess it was yesterday afternoon. All the days are blending together. Too much in-season tournament madness. There's a quarterfinal loser game too. So like the loser of Lakers Suns will play the loser of Sacramento Pelicans.
I think they call it the consolation game. They don't want it to be like,
it's the loser game.
All right, losers, go over there.
You are losers. You didn't make it to Vegas. You now have to go to Sacramento. And I love Sacramento. I actually was texting Sacramento people during the Kings Warriors game that I'm having FOMO and I need to go back to Sac. I miss it so much. I miss the beam. I need to go back to Sac. It was a lovely week I spent there around this time last year, before the Kings became the Kings, before the Kangs became the Kings. And anyway, the Celtics are plus 300. They are the favorites. You got the Bucks behind them at plus 350. The Kings plus 500. Lakers plus 550. Suns plus 600. Pelicans plus 1,200, Pacers plus 1,400, Knicks plus 1,600. What does Vegas know about the Knicks that we don't, Dan? They are the grittiest and grimiest team. They did what they had to do against the Hornets, put them in a single elimination format, put Tom Thibodeau's dogs out there, and they're going to outdog you. Why are they down there, man? This is an affront to your New York Knicks.
I think what they know is that they have to get, the Knicks would have to beat the Bucks and then the Celtics on the road to go get there. I think that's the issue, right? It's less that if the top two teams are the ones you have to go through, you're probably going to be the bottom team. But and the other part is, I guess, if you look at all of those teams and say, Jalen Brunson is as trustworthy in crunch time as it gets, but in terms of who you need to have a big game to hang in there, Julius Randle is one of the more trick-or-treat players in the NBA, although he's coming off a 25, 20, and 5. So here I am yammering about Randle, but I think that it's more about the path they've got in front of them. The fact that the Kings are the best odds in the West is interesting, but I guess when you look at it, there's the Suns have their injury questions, and Devin Booker again, was in and out of the lineup last night with he had rolled his ankle and left the floor a couple times against Toronto. Like the Pelicans is who's in the lineup and who's not. The Lakers have been dicey with their offense, and they've gotten their doors blown off a couple of times. So. Well, although not in the in-season tournament. In the in-season tournament, the Lakers are indestructible. So I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, the Kings being the lead dogs in the West, I think that's kind of interesting. And then all of this, the main thing that I would say is if you are going to be gambling on this, just make sure you're doing it with Michael Imperioli. All of those commercials with him in Las Vegas trying to make this seem like Ocean's 11 seem delightful. And he seems like a good egg. So go get your Imperioli on if you're going to be gambling on this. That's my one request.
That's why I'm going to Vegas for the games. I don't want to watch. I don't want to go in the locker room afterward or before. I want to hang out at the table with the entire cast from The Sopranos. That's my plan.
That's right. Pitch that. See if PR can get that hooked up for you. I bet that they're desirous of coverage.
You said Julius Randle's 25, 20, and 5, and it made me think of who it came against. The Charlotte Hornets, who are here in New York this week for what I like to call the Borough Shuffle, where you get back-to-back games either in Brooklyn or in New York first and then second. So they played against the Knicks on Tuesday, while there was a rollicking in-season tournament game happening at Barclays Center, which I was at, and we will touch on that in a little bit. And I wanted to go back to Barclays tonight to watch LaMelo Ball and the Hornets play, but LaMelo sprained ankle, and it's not like season ending by all accounts, but when you hear the word indefinite and that he's not going to be rushed back and it's the same ankle that he had surgery on previously. It's a real bummer for the Hornets overall from a Charlotte watching experience, to the point where I'm definitely starting to shift into looking at Charlotte as definite seller mode right now. Not like they're going to be barking up any tree at this moment, because I still feel like we're getting close. We're not there yet, but we're getting close to the real trade talk starting to pick up. December 15th, right around the corner. But the Hornets, they got this new ownership structure coming in. There's been plenty of whispers that we've written about at Yahoo Sports about potential changeover in the front office and the coaching staff after the season. So we've got the Pistons on the other side of things that we can talk about after this. But Dan, are the Hornets like the saddest franchise in the league right now? Because at least with Detroit, you've got you can sell yourself on Cade Cunningham being the truth and all that. But I don't know. I was getting excited about seeing LaMelo back and like playing winning games. That overtime win against Boston was awesome. Seems like a little bit more locked in on the defensive side of the ball. They only have 1 year with Miles Bridges. So like, this is not, all of his off-court stuff aside, we're talking about it from a strictly basketball standpoint. Like when he signs the qualifying offer and is going into unrestricted free agency, it's like there's not a lot of confidence or expectation around the league that he's going to be back in Charlotte next year. And the fact that they just put him right back in the starting lineup was surely indicating that, the Hornets were trying to go full blow and push for a postseason appearance this year, even despite like the potentially insurmountable odds that presented themselves, being that they are the Charlotte Hornets and don't exactly have a roster loaded with playoff talent. So is this the bleakest spot we have in the league right now?
It's certainly among them. My first blush answer was no, because the Bulls exist. And because the Bulls they've had similar stagnation with a higher price point and a higher level of talent. And the Hornets at least can say, obviously LaMelo's repeated ankle injuries are a cause for concern. And, there's that fear of, are you ever going to get him on the court for a full season again? But with LaMelo, with Mark Williams, with Brandon Miller, who's looked really strong in the early going of the season, you can sell that as like, well, there's a young core there's like a core of positive young talent to be excited about. But whereas in Chicago, there just really isn't that. Patrick Williams has just never popped. And the other, Kobe White is fine, but not, you're not going to be able to build a franchise around that. Ayo Dosunmu, same deal. Like there's a lower wattage of young talent there with like lower upside for those guys. So I think that's the situation. But you zoom out and look at where the Hornets are, and it's, Steve Clifford after the LaMelo injury the other night said at the Garden, like, obviously it's frustrating. The other night was the first time we went into a game for 2 years where that was the projected starting lineup. That was the team I thought I would coach, and we got it for a quarter in 3 minutes, and then LaMelo got hurt. Like you have yet to see what it could really be. And then when you don't get to see what it could really be, you have the overarching, overwhelming shittiness of the Miles Bridges situation, and like fans giving him a standing ovation when he comes back into the game, goes right into the starting lineup. That that set a lot of teeth on edge around the league and in a lot of fan bases and a lot of people in the Charlotte fan base. There's not much to hold on to, but I think you can look at it and say, if you move on from him, you have those 3 young pieces there. You've got draft equity in the future. You've got maybe a fresh coat of paint in terms of the coaching staff and the front office. Maybe there's a new opportunity there. But what you're seeing now is the vibe. The vibe is not great, and I don't know that it gets demonstrably better if you give James Bouknight another shot and are able to flip the expiring contract of Gordon Hayward for a couple of seconds. I don't know, but it's not one of the more fun situations in the NBA. Although I guess this might be a scenario where comparison is the thief of joy, but comparison can also make you feel a little bit better because they can actually look down at the standings at some other teams, which has not always been the case in Charlotte.
It has not. What's a more optimistic, more positive story, more, I don't know, happy, good feelings situation you want to be diving into here as we continue to bounce around the league?
I'm sort of in the tank for the Pelicans. I've talked about this before. I think this is where maybe they're coming out of a rocky patch, and maybe they're going to start to get an opportunity here. I talked about not to reopen old wounds. I talked about it with Michael Pina on Divine Intervention a little bit. The Zion component of, how many games you're going to get out of him. Is his burst going to be all the way back? Because it hasn't really looked quite that way at the start of the season. But then the question of how much of that is contextual. You don't have a player playing in space. You don't have enough shooting around him. You don't have enough sort of viable shot creators outside of Brandon Ingram around him with all the injuries they've had. So is Zion having a harder time getting to the rim because defenses can just build that wall? Is it because he's just having a harder time getting there and breaking through the wall or sliding through it and getting there? Then on Wednesday, they play Philly and they get CJ McCollum back in the lineup for the first time in a while after the collapsed lung. And suddenly the floor opens up more. And with the gigantic caveat that the Sixers did not have Joel Embiid, which is when the floor, he would shut the floor quite a bit if he was there, but he was not. And so it's like they win going away. They control that whole game. I think like a 127 or 128 offensive rating in that game. Zion goes for 33 on 11 for 12 shooting, both from the field and from the free throw line. So getting wherever he wanted, whatever he wanted, and doing it in ways that looked more explosive, and a wider variety of actions there. Like he's post touches, elbow touches, initiating from the top of the key in the pick and roll, running in transition, like slot cuts where he's able to run into a catch with a head of steam. And then like, good luck dealing with him if he's already got some momentum. He's like the friggin' juggernaut. And so like seeing all of that go together, it's like, that's what the picture needs to look like for them offensively. You had has to be one of the lowest usage games of Brandon Ingram's run in New Orleans, which that's an interesting question in and of itself. I think he only took like 6 shots, but the balance was so much better, and it was tilted toward how do we maximize Zion? And that to me was like the question that makes them one of the most interesting teams in the NBA. One that I wrote about before the start of the season was what does it look like when you get an extended look at Ingram, McCollum, and Zion together, primarily in the context of how do you maximize Zion? And they have all these interesting pieces around, and Dyson Daniels was starting, but he's not really a shooter, but he's a great defender. And McCollum it levels up your shooting and your playmaking, but as a defensive issue, then like, can Herb Jones just guard everybody? Maybe he can. Like maybe they can just like maximize offense and then let Herb Jones do everything on defense. We'll see how that works out. Trey Murphy's going to come back and has been somebody that had a great season last year, has missed the entire start of this season, is somebody that seems like he can kind of solve both of those problems. He's a great shooter and somebody that can really open up the floor more and can maybe be one of those long perimeter defenders as well, balance those lineups, but then who goes to the bench and yada, yada, yada. There's all these sort of questions about how Willie Green would navigate that and how you balance those lineups, how you structure your rotation. Do you have enough pieces there already? Do you need to go like package some of them together with all those picks that New Orleans is sitting on to go find somebody else? If so, who is the piece you look to there? All these sorts of questions that it looked like we weren't necessarily going to get all the answers to because the Pelicans were starting to sort of fall behind the 8 ball. And then they've won enough games and they've started to look a little bit better. And now they're starting to get healthier. And we're going to start to get more answers there. But we saw, and you and I have talked about it before, we've both written about it, the version of the Pelicans we saw for the first 35, 40 games of last season was a legitimate threat in the Western Conference, a team that could absolutely be a problem in a playoff series. And we haven't seen that a ton thus far this season. And I think we kind of started to see the beginnings of it again Wednesday. And I'm like, all right, does business start to pick up from here? And if so, what does that mean for a pretty bunched up middle of the West, where you've got some really great young teams that are starting to run away? You've got the Nuggets that have just got Jamal Murray back. You've got, the Warriors scuffling, the Lakers scuffling, all these teams. Can the Pelicans really like surge up the standings now that they've got everybody together and maybe put Zion in the position to reassert that he's an MVP caliber player, putting it in the right context?
Yeah, the Pelicans people I know have just been begging for a healthy roster, absolutely begging for it. They just want to see what they have before they can even make an evaluation of it, and they just haven't been able to do that yet. So I am happy for the New Orleans people that things are maybe trending in the right direction. I am going to continue to be the doomsdayer of this podcast, though, because I am gearing up to go watch the 15-16 game losing streak Detroit Pistons come into Madison Square Garden tonight, where I've been given direction from our editorial desk to just write the scene of how dismal it is in Detroit, which I hate to be the Grim Reaper of an early young season with a team that was, had some expectations, but it's a mess right now, at least on the court. And there's definitely a lot of whispers about tensions behind the scenes within the franchise as well. And it's a tough experiment right now where it seems like there's not a congruent roster. You've got Isaiah Stewart playing your kind of stretch four role next to Jalen Duren, and you paid Stewart this summer pretty early in the extension cycle, all things considered. Like, I remember walking around the concourse of Thomas and Mack in Las Vegas during Summer League, and people were like, well, the Pistons just gave Isaiah Stewart this 4-year deal, and then they still have James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley on the bench, and it's a lot of tugging and pulling in different directions. And to speak on the injuries that we've continued to be kind of harping on this episode, it's not easy when Bojan Bogdanovic hasn't played a game yet, and he's just wearing very interesting sweaters on the bench every single game. But I don't know what a 35-year-old would have really been. Truly one of the better shooters in the league, especially a movement shooter. I wonder what different space and element that would provide, because right now it's really hard for the Pistons to get into a flow of steady offense. And they got stomped by the Wizards. That was the kind of Super Bowl of the bottom of the standings this past week, where I don't have the schedule in front of me, but if you want to look at, I don't want to mess with my fancy recording setup here and potentially ruin everything and all the great work people are doing behind the glass. But there's just been a lot of talk about the Pistons maybe potentially to struggle winning a game for the rest of 2023. Not the 23-24 season, but all of December. And look, I was on the ground floor. I was up there close and personal for all the Sixers process years. And it's starting to give me that type of like nadir energy where you're at rock bottom. It can't get any worse than this. It truly can't. I mean, they're pushing historic levels of losing streaks here. So, and I don't have confidence they're going to beat the gritty and grimiest New York Knicks that are now going to be pissed off that they're the lowest ranked team in the odds of the NCAA tournament. They're going to prove it to Vegas wrong tonight against the Pistons. But yeah, I am curious to get a sense of them in person. I have not seen them play yet this year. I actually have not ever seen Cade Cunningham play live. And I was excited for this season because he was apparently like far and away the best player of the USA select team that was scrimmaging against the senior team, if you will, that went to Manila. And there was, a lot of talk from people who were in that gym that maybe he was the best player on the floor in games that included Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson and guys like that who were definitely on the rise. So I was hoping to see what that would do. And he's having a great year. He's having a great year, but it's so hard for him to find easy looks. It's hard for anyone there to find easy looks, to the point where I saw someone flame the Pistons Twitter account last night for tweeting out a highlight of Killian Hayes dribbling into a mid-range pull-up. It was like, if your team account is posting these highlights, that's how you know exactly where things go. So anything else you want to say about Vinny Goodwill's Detroit Pistons, Dan?
First off, yeah, like I envy Vinny in a lot of ways, his sneaker collection, the wonderful setup that he's got there. I do not envy that his local is the Pistons. That's a tough hang. A couple of things. First off, I don't care, man. I'll mess up my camera shot to look up information on during the course of the podcast. The longest in-season losing streak in NBA history, 26 games, shared by those process era Sixers in 2014 and the Cleveland Cavaliers post LeBron leaving the first time in 2010. So
pre-Kyrie, as I like to look at it.
That's right, pre-Kyrie. Before, so still a ways for these Pistons to go to get to the absolute depths of historic issues. But you mentioned the schedule. So yeah, they got the Knicks tonight, and then it's home for the Cavs, home for the Grizzlies on December 6th. So that's, circle that one as a potential get right game, I guess. At Orlando versus the Pacers, home and home for the Sixers, at the Bucks, at the Hawks, home for the Jazz 4 days before Christmas, maybe that. Home and home with the Nets, at the Celtics, and then versus Toronto. So that's how they end December. There's not a gimme in that bunch, even if you are not already as bad as the Pistons are. So that is it's a tough road. And yeah, I don't want to, there's many sources of concern in the construction, the way that Troy Weaver has put together the roster, the way that, Monty Williams is managing that roster, it's in search of the culture that he's looking for, the space that they're trying to create, all those sorts of things, the balancing toughness and offense, and how do you navigate all of that? There's a lot to figure out. But I think the biggest thing in year 4 of this rebuild, the biggest thing to really care about most is, to what degree is this context failing Cade Cunningham? And to what degree is this about Cade Cunningham? I'm not saying I have the answer to that, but I think it's the biggest question to consider for the Pistons because he's playing in some of the most desperate for spacing lineups in the entire league. He's got nowhere to go most nights. Like, chances are you freeze frame a pick and roll and you see him come off and there's going to be 3 people in his face because they are not worried about anything else. And the size, the feel, the vision, all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't just give up on that. But I don't mean this to sound mean, especially because, as you mentioned, they're my New York Knicks, right? But the principle or the idea of, as a prospect, Cade, it was like, well, that's Luka. And in practice, the reality has been a little bit more like, what if the Knicks just gave the ball to RJ Barrett for the first 3 years of his career? Like, there's not the burst, there's not the explosion, there's not the shot creation, the getting to the line, the ability to elevate a floor that you need if you're going to be one of those number one table setters. And I think Cade can be that. But there hasn't been a whole lot of evidence of it. So let's go with a couple of numbers here, a couple of just sort of context aspects. Below average finisher, significantly below average for a big wing every year of his career, about like 52% finishing at the rim this year. Just not good enough. 33% shooting from the beyond the arc, has never been above, and never made more than a third of his threes. Not a pull-up threat. So everyone can go under on screens on him and just continue to congest the half court, pack the paint. 3rd lowest free throw attempt rate of any high usage player in the league this season. The only ones lower, Kyle Kuzma, because he's putting them up. It doesn't matter if he's getting into the paint to do it. And LaMelo, same thing, because he's just going to pull up. And so if you are not consistently generating high volume looks at or high quality looks at the rim, you're not cashing in the ones that you get, you're not threatening a defense as a pull-up 3-point shooter or as really any kind of 3-point shooter, because you're not a catch and shoot option because the ball's in your hands all the time, and you're not getting to the free throw line a ton, it's so hard to be a driver of high efficiency offense or even average efficiency offense. And you see that because the Pistons are bad on offense every year. And so there's nature versus nurture. There's content, you're trying to solve these questions, but the solution, the nature of the question is getting pretty important, because after this season, he is eligible for an extension of that rookie deal. And maybe the answer is just you max him out because he was the number 1 pick in the draft. He is the lifeline to whatever you hope to be. You've seen enough in some stretches, and there's the context of he missed most of last year with an injury. And you just sort of like, well, we're paying because it's the fund max, as Brian Windhorst calls it, the 25% max. It's not going to be onerous on our books, and we're going to figure it out. And in 2 years' time, it's going to look like a steal because we're going to put the right context around him. But I would understand some trepidation in doing it, is all I'm saying, because we have not seen evidence.
Not to interrupt you. Just,
go for it.
That's what the Bulls thought about Zach LaVine. And here we are a couple years later.
Yeah, like, you are accepting it's faith in things that are not in evidence yet. Like, if you believe he can be the elevator of an offense, we just have not seen that yet. And maybe it's because of the spacing. Maybe it's because of Bojan Bogdanovic being out. Maybe it's because they're trying to just jam every center that somebody else didn't like into a rotation. But at some point, you need to see Cade Cunningham be the guy that lifts that floor up. And so far, we have not seen it. So that to me, the entire rest of the season, win, lose, or draw, it needs to be about answering that question. Can you put something in place to help answer that question about Cade Cunningham? Because nothing else really matters if that one doesn't get figured out.
Yeah, the biggest side effect I learned through my 3 years of reporting on tanking is that when you do this and you continue to collect top guys at the top of the draft year after year after year, all of a sudden you look up and it's year 4 of the rebuild, to your point, Dan, and you have to start paying dudes who have not proven to be capable of together winning basketball games yet. And it could potentially put you in just a debilitating hamstring down the line when their salary is not commensurate with what the winning expectation should be of those dollar figures, which is why I thought the Houston Rockets going out and paying guys like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks to try to raise the floor of what Houston could do, to then better evaluate guys like Jalen Green and Jabari Smith and Alperen Sengun and down the line. I thought that was not just good from a general, like, we need to take a step in the right direction here because we have been the worst team in the league for 3 straight years, but also it provided that context that you're asking for Cade Cunningham, to look at all those dudes. And Jalen Green was probably the guy I wanted to see the most. It's been really great that Alpi has taken Jokic type strides this season that we've talked about here before. I find it hard to find someone who is not just going to take the worst case scenario of Jabari Smith as a win, being like a 6'10" shooter who can defend multiple positions. Jalen Green's a swing piece of this franchise, and I'm curious what you've seen on him so far through the first, quarter-ish of the season.
Yeah, it was one of your one of the players that you were most interested in the West. Like, who is both what he can be right now and like what does this season in this better context show about who he can be moving forward. I have vacillated on him somewhat. I feel like there were aspects of when I was writing about like what's the most interesting thing about the worst teams in the NBA the last couple of seasons. He would be the thing that popped because the ball was just in his hand all the time, and he would go through these stretches of averaging like 25 or 26 points a game. There was like cotton candy production in games that didn't really mean anything because they were always playing out the string, or like he would do a little bit of growth in the 2-man game with Sengun, and then the question was like, how much is that about Sengun and how much of it is about Jalen Green? And then I'm flicking around last night and I get onto the Rockets-Nuggets game, which was the Nuggets controlled literally the entire game. There was zero ties, 0 lead changes. Denver just won that game and controlled it the whole time. But the third quarter of that game, Jalen Green just absolutely went nuclear. And it was 19 points on 6 shots, 4 threes, 4 free throw attempts, 4 assists. And I was like, oh, that's what everyone sees. That's what, when people are like, that guy's got I could lead the league or be a top, an all-star scorer kind of guy. That's what everyone's talking about. And it was the ways he was doing it. I mentioned earlier with the different touches that Zion was getting. He's running pick and roll. He's running 2-man game with Sengun, and he's lasering passes around, like hitting Jabari Smith Jr. across the court for a 3, having the patience and the handle to kind of get the defender on his hip and hit Sengun rolling for a layup, hitting the quick kind of hit, like simple pass off to the left wing to get Jeff Green on the cut, but like the right pass at the right time to create an advantage and extend it, which is like, that's not something that he's had in the bag, necessarily for the first couple of years of his career. And it's not something that every young scorer gets right away. The mapping of the floor, the understanding, like, get it out of my hand, get it out now so that somebody else can do something with it, as opposed to me just cooking, which, by the way, he can still do. And he's like, Denver's playing the drop. All right, I'm getting to the mid-range and I'm pulling up. You're a little bit behind on the screen. I'm pulling up from 3. I'm getting off of it early and then making myself a target so I can be a catch and shoot three-point shooter. Like, the array of ways, grab and go off the defensive glass and transition, get myself to the line. 3-level scorer with juice, with burst, who's seeing the floor and mapping it out and making the reads. It's like, if that's what you need, that's what it needs to be. That plus I compete on defense, which is now the table stakes under Ime Udoka, and has been, and I wrote a big thing about the Rockets defense last week. Then of course they go get torched by the Nuggets, but also getting torched by the Nuggets. Everyone gets torched by the Nuggets. Not that big a deal. That's the sign of something. There is the at least if nothing else, it shows the potential for what could be there in that package. And maybe the most exciting part of all of it for like someone who looks at how these teams are built and how they're growing. This wasn't him shot jacking. This wasn't like, screw it, everybody 1-4 flat, get out of the way, I'm running it. It was in the course of it was the flow of the offense. It was getting other people involved. It wasn't ponderous 9 dribble possessions. There was pace, there was intent. It was natural. It felt organic. And if that's true, and the other sort of growth that we've seen from him, like usage down a little bit, efficiency up a little bit, assist rate up a little bit, turnover rate staying steady, all these kind of things. Like if that keeps moving in the right direction and he's giving you the effort on defense and he has the potential to just go off like this, that's the kind of thing that if you're a Rockets fan, you can say like, all right, we're building to something there. Everyone is focused on Şengün, and completely understandably so, justifiably so. But that's still there. That's like an untapped resource that you've got in reserve. And that, to look at it and say, if you come out of the season with, we have a serious defense, we've got real players, and there's 2 guys who have all-star upside, where it might be closer to that now than we thought. I mean, for a 1-year turnaround, it's hard to get more excited than that.
Hard to get more excited than that, except for sitting in Barclays Center watching the Boston Celtics hack Andre Drummond in the fourth quarter. That was my experience on Tuesday night. And look, I've been bullish on the in-season tournament all along. I've been hoping it's been good because right now, if you just take a step back, strip away all the courts, strip away all the point differentials and whatever, there's only one extra game that teams have to play. If you make it to the championship game and you get money for it, every other game has just been another regular season game in theory, except with more polish on it and more things to talk about. I think it's been an objective win for the league. It's been fun. It's been stupid. It's been all things you could put into it, but it's been good. It's been good. There's been a lot of feedback that I want to channel into a hot Jake, but I just want to kind of take people through the night of Tuesday night because it was cool. Like going into that arena, knowing that Group C history was on the line, the first ever Group C champion, where like with the tiebreakers, the point differential that has had plenty of players up in arms, and Billy Donovan was not pleased with the hack of Drummond thing. Like, and I know I've talked about being in Manila at the World Cup so many times in this show. So if you want to take another drink while you're listening at home, please do. But I saw it then, and I talked to players about it in the story I wrote in early September about what lessons can we learn from the World Cup and apply it to the in-season tournament. And Bobby Portis was definitely gung-ho about the point differential back then, and I would assume nothing has changed, being that the Bucks have made it and they are hosting a game. So, and Devin Booker said it last night because he was one of the players who was hunting shots at the end of the game, and it helped position Phoenix to get into this knockout round in general. This whole thing about the respect of the game and respect your opponents, and we need to do things above board, and that's not how we do things in the NBA. It's bullshit. These are grown men making millions of dollars. And the fact that the in-season tournament has forced these teams and these players to fight and compete and be creative, trying to figure out different competitive advantages till the final buzzer, I think is a massive win compared to turning off a game because it's a 30-point blowout in the fourth quarter in a November regular season matchup, where I was sitting there watching Boston on my laptop in the stands, and the like dichotomy of the Celtics being up so big and trying to keep being up bigger. And the second that game ended, it wasn't direct. And I don't think that like all of Brooklyn knew, all right, we need to win by 19 points now. But like there was a clear, obvious change in how the Nets were playing, being that they knew they had to win by a bunch and they were tied 94-94 with 4.5 minutes to go. And you just saw Mikal Bridges ripping down a rebound and pushing up the floor and spraying it out to Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal. And these guys are chucking threes, hunting for as many points as they can. And when like they got fouled with 6 seconds to go and they go to the line, you're like feeling, oh, they're getting close. It just added a different element to it. So I'm in. That was an awesome night. Tuesday night was an awesome night. I got home from the arena. I wanted to go to sleep, and then I got a push alert that Golden State and Sacramento were in a 5-point game with 5 minutes to go from my Apple TV push alert and to catch the epic finish, and I did. It was an epic finish. It was awesome. So I'm in on it. I have one hot Jake to really wrap all this thing up, though, Dan, and it is this. The two things I've seen people have criticisms about consistently, and not just criticisms, but like kind of ideas on what to fix and how we can make it better, are the total prize at the end of this and the tiebreaker, which I said, I've been on record here. I've said it to this camera, said it to you, said it to people listening at home. I like the tiebreaker thing with the point differential. I don't really see a truly better way. Some people have suggested it be your standings overall, maybe something else. I don't know. But with the tiebreaker, with the prize potentially being a postseason appearance or a draft pick or whatever, someone even suggested to me the other day, what if you got just like a fake 3 games in the standings for winning it? So like no matter where you are, you get an added 3 games.
Like an artificial bump up.
Exactly. Or some type of, I like the idea of an automatic berth in the play-in tournament. So there's like some synergy there because the league has definitely said they didn't want this tournament to have a true impact on the playoffs. Well, it wouldn't. It would just have an impact on the play-in. So all that being said, if I haven't said this on the show before, my favorite TV show is The Challenge on MTV. And if you're unfamiliar, it is basically the combination of Survivor and Real World, where you have the physical challenges and the politics and the eliminations of Survivor mixed in a beautiful mansion set on some hill in some exotic location. And instead of the cast members and the competitors starving themselves and trying to claw to survive, they are drinking and hooking up with each other. It is a beautiful, massive reality TV. But one of the greatest parts of the game is they change the game every year. They change if it's a single winner, if it's a team, if it's a pair. They change the amounts of money. They change the format. I think it'd be cool if the prize of the in-season tournament was different every year. So this year it's money. Next year it's a playoff bid. The year after that, it's a draft pick. The pushback I got from some people pitching this idea yesterday was, well, if we're trying to make this thing a thing, if we're trying to make it so it's not as confusing and people understand the point differential stuff and whatever, you kind of need a uniformity to keep building the familiarity and the overall literacy of fans and team people alike. Because, man, to a man on the coaching staff and amongst the rosters, like half these guys didn't know what the hell was going on. So there's an argument that I heard that in order to change that, in order to have people understand, you need to keep the same stuff going. But what if we did it? What if we just wanted to keep it different and keep it spicy and new and something to talk about every year? Because that's been the biggest win. The whole point of this is to have conversation about it. It's not really to like have better basketball. It is, but it isn't. You're hoping the product does benefit from it. But the NBA is really just hoping that there's more viewership for it and therefore more revenue opportunities. Doesn't necessarily need to have better gameplay, but that's obviously the hope. So I don't know, Dan, any final IST thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think so. I get what you're saying. And I get that I get the idea of this whole thing is, Calvin ball, where the rules are kind of it feels like they're being made out of whole cloth as we're going, no matter what. But when I think about the two more recent innovations or instances of innovation that the league has put into place, and we talked about this, I think, at the beginning of the tournament, there's everything that they've tried with All-Star Weekend the last decade or so. And then there's the play-in tournament. And the play-in tournament has more or less, it's only been for a few years, but it's basically set. You know what it is. I think the first season there was that wrinkle of like, if you are more than X games back of the, then like you're not gonna, you wouldn't be able to get in. But like, we kind of know what it is. 7 through 10, you know who's going to play, you have to win the first game to get in, or you have to win 2 to get it, whatever. You kind of get the framework of it now. All-Star where it's like, this year it's USA versus the world. This year it's this guy versus this guy. This year it's we're televising the draft. This year we're not televising the draft. This year it's the Elam ending. This year it's whatever. And it's like everything has kind of like the amount of gimmickry and shifting associated with that, I think has turned a lot of people off, especially because as you mentioned, like the what people are think of responding to about this, it's not like, yes, there were blowouts in a lot of those games, but that blowout did not equate to a lack of quality of play. They were blowouts because teams were really pouring it on and trying their asses off. And as opposed to in the All-Star game where no one tries and the scores are big. So you are getting quality of play, which I think then in turn feeds the viewership. And like, I think my take on this from the beginning of it was, or at least from the beginning of this season, in years past, I've been like, why do we need more new They'll just make good basketball and people will go to it. It's my take for this was, I don't really care what the courts look like or the jerseys look like or whatever, as long as the games are good. The games have been good. The main overarching thing of that Tuesday night was that every game had stakes. All 8 games were interesting in some capacity. Some of them were like really good games. Like Wolves Thunder was a friggin' awesome game.
Bucks Heat was great.
You're seeing high quality. Yeah, right. Bucks Heat was great. And so you're seeing like the national TV games are really, and then of course the Kings Warriors later, which is a dramatic and awesome game that has storyline intrigue across multiple seasons with those two franchises, and then also had drama and intrigue specifically related to the tournament itself. So I think the elevating the quality of the play is the point, because otherwise a lot of these games before you get to Christmas, people were just like, who cares? There's no reason to be invested in it. And now there is. And so the thing that I would say, you mentioned changing the prize package, changing the prize pool or whatever. The fact that multiple players on multiple teams, veterans, have talked about this being like, it makes sense, or we care about getting that money because we want the young guys to get it, especially. That
look for a player making $5 million, $500,000 is a pretty good chunk of your salary. Like it's a nice bonus.
Absolutely. And I think not to bring everything back to RJ Barrett apparently, but I think RJ Barrett the other night was like, if somebody told you could go to Vegas and win $500,000, wouldn't you be stoked to that? Like all you got to do is go win a basketball game and you win $500,000. Like, yeah, okay, that does make a ton of sense. And so I think they've found a good motivation. I don't know if draft positioning or a play-in berth would necessarily motivate the players in the same way as everyone gets $500,000.
For sure.
Because that is an immediate thing that you can say, that good, Christmas is taken care of. I got my $500,000 bonus. But
the one criticism I think, and the valid pushback of the money prize pool is, sure, like you're saying, you want players playing harder, the games being better, so then people will watch. I don't know how many fans are going to resonate with a lot of multimillionaires. RJ Barrett, to use our example, a guy making $30 million, getting an extra $500,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's not exactly like
that's not the point.
A heartwarming storyline there.
Yeah, right. But fans don't give a shit about heartwarming storylines as much as they care about a good product to watch. And so if the players care about the money and the players are making the game more exciting, then the game is more exciting, and then fans will they care about that. So I think it's funny. It's like a roundabout way. There are many criticisms of the league at all times from all angles and all, provinces. But one of the ones that always comes around is like, well, under David Stern, everything was about promoting the league and promoting the game and promoting the stars. And in the Adam Silver era, it's more about promoting the drama. And in a roundabout way, all the gimmickry and the bells and the whistles has brought it back to, if the game is entertaining, people will watch it. And if you give the players and the coaches and everybody else involved a reason, additional motivation to make the game more interesting. And if the game is more interesting, people will watch it. And I think that's what we're seeing so far. And whether that persists through knockout play and into the semifinals and into the finals, we'll see. But it could not have gotten off to a better start in terms of this actually does make have a tangible effect on the quality of the play. It seems like, at least. And whether that's true or not, or it's placebo or not, I don't know. But the games have been good and entertaining to watch. And like, what more can you ask for?
What more can you ask for except another edition of No Cap Room next week, live from Vegas, in between the quarterfinals, semifinals.
Some of us are live from Vegas. Some of us.
I'll be live from Vegas. We'll be recording our next episode after the semifinal games and before the championship. I'm excited to do that. But for now, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you, as always, to John Gennaro for doing all the things he does to look and make the show sound great. And also our great podcast head, Brett Rader, for getting up early and helping us as well with all of our new bells and whistles here. Please follow us on various social media platforms that are out there, at Jake L. Fischer and at Your Man Devine. Subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on, and leave us a 5-star review. That would be great. We thank you for listening, and we'd appreciate it if you came back again next week for another episode of No Cap Room.